What's the quote I can clip here where people are like, oh my God, this guy's crazy?
I mean, at some point, my job is to get rid of my job. My job is to simplify packaging and reduce and eliminate packaging where necessary. But I don't think my job will ever go away.
Yeah.
The best thing that I can do sometimes is eliminate my job.
Hey, it's Valley Matos on Packaging Unboxed podcast. Today we're talking to Brent Lindbergh from Fuseneo. He's the founder. He's the lead designer. These guys do amazing work from Fiji Water, Amazon, Starbucks to Tropicana. These guys do some really cool packaging beyond what you typically see on shelf. We're going to get into sustainability, concept development, materials, pretty much everything you need to know about packaging. And you get to hear us kind of hammer out what you would need to do if you were going to redesign some of the world's worst packaging, which is bacon packaging. Great episode. I enjoyed making this with Brent. Somebody told me I should bulk record all these episodes. So I did that. I'm not digging it. This episode was actually recorded a few months ago. As part of those bulk process, I finally got to releasing this one. So I'm sorry that it took so long to get to it, but I'm really excited to bring this one to you because Brent brings a lot of great information. He's hilarious. Check him out. Find him on LinkedIn. Find him on YouTube. They do unboxings. One unboxing they did that I think is hilarious is they did an entire car that arrived on a pallet from India or China. I can't remember what it was. Super fun. I think if you're a designer and you're learning about packaging, start ordering stuff, go to stores, buy stuff just for the packaging, unbox it, learn how people are doing things. It's really important. If you're a professional designer, do it because you're going to find inspiration in all these different areas. Just the way that Brent does. I do this as well. I order tons of packaging for all sorts of stuff, because I want to see how things are being packaged, how people are coming up with these concepts. If you've learned anything from previous episodes, if you're going to learn something from this episode, do me a favor, go to YouTube and subscribe. Just a quick sponsor note, idpdirect.com. Check these guys out. They do factory direct packaging. If you're ordering packaging from a distributor, why not just cut that distributor out and go straight to the factory and order packaging from them, right? IDP Direct makes retail bags, gift boxes, e-commerce packaging. They do all this stuff in-house in their factories across the world. Check them out, idpdirect.com. The other sponsor that I think is important for you to know is specwrite.com. If you've got a brand with hundreds of SKUs of packaging, it's important to know all the specifications of all the packaging because EPR laws are coming. They're already here in a bunch of different states. They're in a bunch of different countries. If you're importing your product into different countries or you're exporting it out of the US and there are EPR laws wherever it is that your product is going, they need to know the specifications of every single SKU going into their countries. Otherwise, you're going to be taxed. You're going to be fined. Guess what SpecWrite does? They collect all that information and they have it to you in seconds. It's going to save you hundreds of hours of data collection. Not only that, it makes it really easy to reorder your packaging and keep your packaging consistent. So check them out, specwrite.com. Let's get to the show. All right, so we're talking to Brent Lindbergh from Fuseneo. Brent, man, thanks so much for hopping on here.
Pleasure.
How's it going?
It's going well. It's a gloomy day, but it's cheery in here.
Yeah, 100%, dude. It's always cheery with you. Where are you guys?
We're outside of Chicago. Studio's about 30 miles west of downtown Chicago.
What does Fuseneo do?
Fuseneo is a material and process agnostic packaging design firm. So, we help brands wrestle with sometimes it's super large meta challenges about, around reusable packaging or around sustainability or just efficiencies and things like that. And so helping them reinvent and redesign packaging.
Wow. So you're agnostic, so you don't believe in Jesus.
I guess agnostic. I'm undecided as apparently.
Right. So from all right. So is it that you've got experience in all different materials? You've got different people on your team that kind of handle different materials, or like how does that really come into play?
We've got a team made up of industrial designers, graphic designers, and packaging engineers that have really, and we've worked in, just about every area of packaging across all different things from consumer electronics to toys to food and beverage and chemicals and even large bulky things like televisions and treadmills. And the materials that we have to really tap into are vast. You go to and I came from this world, so I actually started on the manufacturing side of the world in blow molding, and people would come in and say, hey, what should I do with my beef jerky sticks? And you're like,
Right.
put it in a bottle because we sell bottles, right? Like it's what we do.
Yeah.
And that was it was a great company. I loved it. It was amazing. But that was my challenge, was like, it's not the right thing for this brand. The right thing for this brand might be flexible. The right thing for this brand might be in paper.
Yeah.
The right thing might be in actually stamped metal, or, there's just so many different places to go that when I was living in the world of one or two materials and one process, it was, we couldn't
Yeah.
really, wasn't always, with selfless intent. It can't be on the manufacturing side.
I know for me, like, and being in like the paper side on, rigid board, molded fiber like paper, like that area, I do find myself sometimes telling a brand, hey, if you're looking for from a sustainability standpoint, maybe this isn't the right solution for this particular project. At least today, it seems like it's a lot easier to do, where you can say no to a particular client and say, this isn't the right application. It seems to actually build your business more today to be able to say that when you're in a particular industry. Just from it's so different today than it was before, right?
Yeah, I think what we've seen, and again, man, haven't done this for 25 years, and if you're on the manufacturing side, your job is to sell and produce.
Yeah.
And so even if it's not the right thing, and you might say, hey, this isn't ideal, but this is how we would do it, it still might be the path of least resistance for a brand, just to say, oh, we've already got a relationship with you, sure, let's just go.
We're this far along. Yeah.
And it's like, well, and so, even if a bottle was the right thing for that brand, we're going to design a bottle that runs on one of our lines and uses our material. Like it's just that, like, if it's something that's a little bit different, that was really the right thing for the brand, it helps in these ways. Like, it's hard. You have to deal with those internal conflicts. And I think that was, that's not ultimately why I left. And I wasn't conflicted by that, but it was a challenge that I had to face, being on that side of the world. And then being able to step outside of that and say, all right, we aren't beholden to any one process or any one supplier. Let's be the advocate directly for the brand to say, hey, what's the right thing for you? Now let's go figure out who can make that happen. So that's kind of, we jump pretty deep into the weeds there pretty quick, but that's that's a little bit of the ethos to why I started the firm, and why we do what we do.
In terms of like who you're working with, you guys work with Amazon, you guys work like Fiji Water, you do a ton. Like you said, you pretty much do. You can tackle anything. I can't remember if this is just now or like the previous conversation we had, but in terms of like the size of the clients that you're working with, who do you have to be to come in and work with Fuseneo?
We try and work with a lot of different types of companies. Most of our companies, I would say, are in kind of that, that Fortune 500. They're usually large global brands in a lot of different spaces, because their packaging challenge is usually scale, right? Their sustainability challenges are at they can't use real obscure things, because they've got to do it times 100 million. So, our brands are usually larger. We'll take on a few, 2, 3 small brands a year, and and small usually means still in the several millions, the many millions, that it's like we're now like at a point where we are thinking about scale and growing and doing some of those things. That's typically where brands pick us up. When they're really small, a lot of times it's just they work with a supplier that they've got a relationship with that can make a small amount of something, and they're kind of stuck with that process, just because they don't have the funds to necessarily go out and and really reinvent or do something bigger.
If I'm a brand, I come to you, like, what's the working process? Like, what's that? What's like the onboarding and what's the expectation?
I mean, so there's kind of a whole process that we go through without going super deep through it. The really it's kind of what you would expect with hopefully any supplier relationship that you have. You're dating. We're learning what makes them tick, what's really valuable to them, where the challenges are, kind of what the ethos of the brand is. We're learning those things together. They're learning about who we are and the types of things that we've done and what we do, but it's really more about us learning about them. And from there we start to frame together, what does this relationship look like? Is this you call us when you need help? Is this we're always on call? Is this a project specifically that we're going to go tackle? And then we scope and frame that up, and then that process begins of a project or or some type of retainer where we are systematically really helping them go through a process. We've got these 4P process and some other things that we take brands through that really make sure we are understanding the entire pipeline of packaging, from how it's produced to ultimately how it's disposed of. And so, yeah, that's like a super crash course into how a brand works with us. But
yeah, if I'm coming in to work with Fuseneo, like, why am I picking you? Like, how have I found you, and why are you the team to work with?
First of all, how have you found us? We are probably not the best at being found always. And there's, that's not intentional in a malicious way, but at the same time, we want brands that really need us to find us. And so a lot of it still is word of mouth amongst large brands. And there's companies like Amazon that we work with will certainly connect us up with brands all over the place, or different things. But a lot of it's kind of word of mouth, and then we get invited to kind of speak at a lot of different events where these brands are at, and occasionally people find us on Google, which is, as always, amuses me when somebody's like, "Oh, I've been searching for days and I stumbled upon you guys." But yeah, I think whether it's a supplier that introduces them to us or some other way, that's typically how most people find us.
The reason I reached out to you was I was talking to the Tropicana team, and you guys did this Mimosa spray, right? So it's not just right. So if I want to work with Fuseneo, it's not just that I need to ship a product, product A from point A to point B and get it on shelf and get clients to see it. Like, you guys are doing some pretty fun stuff, like this Mimosa spray. And if anybody's listening, you haven't seen it, I'll have a picture of it and video of it on the YouTube. But like, how does that come about? Like, where does that idea generate?
Yeah, well, I mean, we had a relationship with PepsiCo when Tropicana was owned by PepsiCo, and some of those people kind of carried over when when Tropicana got spun off as the Tropicana Brands Group in the last couple of years. But we had done a lot of the structural design work on the bottles that are out there today, the bottles that you drink out of, and so they identified this kind of social thing that was happening, where people were actually putting orange juice into just an off-the-shelf spray bottle and spritzing it in. It was, it was humorous, right? This whole kind of viral trend that was going on, and they said we should be in front of that. I mean, we should be the ones that are doing this and having the most fun with it. And so they had gone out and kind of said, "Hey, we want to design a new trigger, and we want to design this," and the suppliers are like, "You guys realize this is like a 12-month process, and it costs X number of millions of dollars to do something like this, and this is just way out there." And every kind of path that they turned down, they were getting shut down. And the team just finally reached back to me and said, "Hey, we're not getting anywhere with our supply base. Like, that, what do we do?"
Yeah.
It's like, well, this isn't like what you're talking about. It's not a scalable like the social piece of it. This isn't like something that you're going to go full bore with and like make them and sell them and build a whole business out of. This is something. So we got to
Yeah.
approach it completely different than a supplier would. And
Yeah. It's commercial.
this isn't commercial. This is prototypes. I mean, ultimately we built prototypes. And a limited number of them. I don't know if they've disclosed how many are out there, but it's not many. And so we had to approach it from that lens. But the challenge was, hey, how do we capitalize and really play with this trend, and what's the right way to do it as Tropicana? And so we started playing with like, well, how do we vary the amount of orange juice we dispense? And we had designed these like perfume puffers and these like little dosing droppers and things like that. We had just kind of done a whole spectrum of designs that of ways that we could like very tiny amounts, or as we called it, like a hint or a whisper of OJ, all the way to like, okay, I actually want some OJ taste. And so we just, designed a spectrum of things, and then landed on one of those designs for a handful of reasons, and then ultimately prototyped, the set like of samples that went out into the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it started with just this fun challenge, and what is the right way to do it? We don't know. It's not one material. Like we were looking at glass droppers and little plastic straws and vials and rubber puffers. Like it's not a material thing. It's a packaging challenge. I want to deliver a product. I need to store a product, display a product, like whatever. It's a packaging challenge. And so we approached it like any other packaging project.
So what do you actually get, right? Like the few people that are getting it, the influencers that are getting, I'm assuming is it a lid that screws on, and it's the same kind of lid that you have on the current bottles? Like,
yep. It is actually, it is the same as the current lid. We took production lids and then integrated a pump sprayer, like a food safe pump sprayer, and then designed kind of all new housing and components around it you can dial in. There's like 3 settings on it to vary the amount of spray that comes out. And but yeah, it's actually you take off the current cap on the little 12-ounce bottles, and you screw this new one
on. Dude, that is awesome. It's awesome. I saw that. As soon as I saw it, I reached out and I'm like, dude, this is hilarious. But people, when people think about packaging, they think about like product packaging, retail packaging, e-com. But there's so much more. Like this is packaging, but it's a viral component to a branding exercise, like to a bigger commercial conversation. What other kinds of things are you guys done, or what's like, what else have you done that I think would have the same level of impact?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, I don't think people totally understand the scope and scale of packaging. It happens at the industrial level all the way down to the retail level. It's the vessel that transports products. It's how things get delivered and consumed. It's as we dive into our challenges, like some of the things we work on is how does Disney eliminate waste in parks? From the way that people eat food to the way that people consume products, the way like those are packaging challenges, right? All those things are packaging pieces. All the things that we interact with inside of an amusement park are this packaging. And so, how does a company like Google ship servers around the world and deal with those types of it's a packaging challenge. It's a totally different scale. You're dealing with automation and reusable systems and things like that. But like to us, they all have packaging. We have these 4 Ps, these produce, protect, present, perform. And this like those are all like, if you think about all the things that packaging does, and all the different, like if you just look at all the different things around you, you just realize really how much packaging there is out there that you're interfacing with that you don't really maybe think of as packaging. Even we've been doing a decent amount of stuff lately, even in like pharma spaces and things like that. You apply deodorant, that's packaging that it holds, and the way that you use it and open it and apply it, or like it's where device meets packaging, but it's packaging. And so there's it's so vast. It's so fun, the different areas that we can get into. One day it's tennis shoes, and the next day it's ice cream, and yeah, it's fun.
So, so you've got, all right. So you do you do a bunch of videos, you do a bunch of unboxing videos that you share online. I see them all over LinkedIn all the time. I don't know. You guys did a car once. I remember you unboxed a car.
Yeah. I think we're going to do a follow-up on that pretty soon. That car's been modified a little bit.
You guys driving that thing around. That was so funny. What do you learn from, all right. So what are you learning from all of these unboxings? Are these brands that you're working with?
No, not always. There's
what do you
occasionally.
learn?
In fact, our focus is it's not always on the stuff that we're working with. It shouldn't be. We shouldn't be that caught up in ourselves that we're just talking about what we do. But occasionally we'll do one, but I would say we've maybe only done a couple that are ones that we actually designed. Even our conference room, like our conference room is full of samples, and people are like, oh, you did all this stuff. I was like, no, I hope not. Like, we've got shelves out in our studio that show some of the cool stuff we've done, but like, we want to be inspired by stuff that we didn't do. We want to be inspired by other categories and industries and all these other things. And so the videos kind of started from a couple of things. One, just this fascination with seeing how things were done. And sometimes, like, you get into a category, hey, we're going to be doing apparel. All right, well, let's order a bunch of apparel stuff in and see what happens. Well, once you do, you start to see cool stuff that's going on out there. And so that you maybe would have never touched. It might be a small brand, it might be international, whatever, that you maybe hadn't experienced. And so part of it was kind of that. And then the other piece of it was, like, it's really just about educating. How can we like open people's minds to be thinking about packaging? Oh, I never really thought about it like that before. Like, I hear it all the time. Like, oh, after I've watched your videos, I like go through the store and I'm like looking at stuff differently now, or I think differently about how, when I do go to the recycling bin, how I'm sorting my stuff, and perfect. Like, we're helping people think about sustainability. We're helping people like just realize in a very different way, like those nature documentaries, right? Like, where you're like, wow, I didn't realize a flower looked like that if you look super close and in depth. And it in a super twisted way, packaging's very similar. People just don't realize it when they toss it in their cart and they bring it home, or it shows up on their doorstep. There's a whole lot of thought and engineering and intentionality that goes into that.
You've got packaging design, prototyping, and testing. I'm not hiring you to prototype stuff. Like, that's just part of the process, right?
No, there are actually people who just call us to say, hey, I need,
Really?
Yep. We get calls pretty frequently. From the moment I started the company, prototyping was a huge piece. I think prototyping is an essential piece to like making decisions and helping drive the process. And so we've invested in some pretty extensive prototyping capabilities, and now we've got our studio is more shop than it is studio. We can get out there and MIG weld, TIG weld, plasma cut, machine, cast, thermoform. Like, we can go out and do like all these crazy things. And so we've built huge competency around that. But yeah, we get brands all the time. Sometimes even fun, like, oh, hey, we're doing a video shoot. Actually, we just did one the other day for this. I don't think we publicized it, but Kraft Foods did this really cool black garlic mayo launch, and they did this thing in the Transylvania forest of Germany on Halloween. Like, it was so good that even vampires can't resist this, like, black garlic mayo. And so they reached out and were like, hey, can we like quick model up and prototype this cap, instead of having one like valve in the middle, it's got two for like fangs. And so, we'll get sometimes these bizarre like TV requests. Oh, we're Kind Bar and we're doing a television commercial, and we need stuff that's not glossy, but it's like a satin finish, so the lights aren't shining off of it, and it's got some of the regulatory removed and things like that. So yeah, we wind up doing a decent amount of like straight up prototyping.
Wow, but those are brands that you're already working with, or they're calling
no, some
you,
of them
and
just
that's
find
the
us
only
for
project that you
prototyping.
do.
Yeah.
Wow. And then, I mean, I'm assuming that's a great door opener, right? Because now you've worked with them, and Now you can sell them packaging design.
Yeah, I mean, if that's what they need, right? I'm a bad salesperson.
At some point.
I think we at least have built a relationship. They know who they can turn to, and I think at the end of the day, we want to be somebody that people rely on. And if and it's like that call that came from Kraft was like, hey, I didn't know who to call, but I figured you'd be able to help us out and you could figure it out for us. And like we'll figure it out. Which was similar to the Tropicana call, right? It was like, I don't know where to go. It's so.
Yeah, I've tried all the options, and now I'm coming
hopefully
to you.
We're not the last resort, right? But
right.
So yeah, it is a good intro for us to build a relationship with brands, and if there's an opportunity to support them down the road, would love to help. But yeah, it's a pretty active piece of what we do, helping brands that maybe they've done some graphics and it's on flexible or it's a paperboard box or whatever it is. They just want to visualize it and they want to do photography of it. They want to do something. So yeah, we do that. That's actually how we interface with some of the smallest brands.
You're material agnostic. Then how do you approach sustainability? I'm sure that's a big conversation point with your clients.
And I love it. I love this topic. Sustainability, it doesn't just have one face, right? And I think that's what's really important. There are different ways to tackle it. There's different ways to view it, and they're all moving in the right direction. But it's more than one facet. You've got brands that say, "Hey, it's all about recycling." And we want everything to be curbside recyclable. You've got a lot of large brands that have committed to that. Hey, everything needs to be curbside recyclable. Well, that's great. But then you've got brands over on the other side that say, hey, we think recycling is broken. We think the whole idea is less material. Well, that's where a lot of like the films and flexibles industry lives. And then you've got people that are like, oh no, plastics in general are the devil and we want to get out of plastics. And I would say, they all have their merits to them. We don't have materials that aren't plastic that can preserve or keep medical products safe in a way that like we just don't have materials that exist that aren't plastic in some of those cases, and so we got to do the right thing. And everybody wants their chips and their bread to be fresh, and like at the end of the day, plastics are allowing us to do that. So let's not treat plastics as the devil. Let's figure out like what the merits are of materials and use them wisely, use the amount of them wisely. And if you're a brand who says, hey, I believe that that recycling is the way to go, well, then you should be investing in the recycling ecosystem and infrastructure, right? You should be teaching consumers how to recycle. You should be doing that stuff. If you're somebody who says, hey, I think recycling is broken, then you should be doing everything in your power to reduce the amount of material that you're using, and looking at alternative streams from composting to films collection and things like that. That's what you should be investing in and teaching consumers. So we don't believe one way is the right way. We think it aligns with brands' values and what they can physically do, and then helping them go down that road.
I just spoke to Ava Lagarde, who's with a team called Resources out of France, and we were just talking about how like Chanel is currently investing. So like this is the first time like they're actually taking funds and investing them on waste stream collection and purification of materials, right? Because then that way they can use the material. So like it's glass collection, and they're now separating glass in either white, clear, or colored, right? And like for them, it's a benefit because they want recycled glass, and it needs to be either white or clear, so it gives them a pure form of the material. But they're putting their money where their mouth is.
And I think that's important. That like glass has been something that's gotten a really bad rap. Like it is infinitely recyclable. Now a lot of brands tint it and do some other things which affect the reusability and the value of it. Recycling is all about money. All of it is there's money tied to the end of it. Like it has to have value to be recyclable. And glass is one of those things that there was a lot of push to, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of recyclers that have stopped taking it because it's contaminating paper streams and it's doing other things. And so there's actually a lot of recycling infrastructure that's not even taking glass anymore. So if you're somebody who believes in glass, it's the right thing for you and for your business. You absolutely should be investing into that ecosystem and infrastructure.
Yeah, I know when I did a tour, a MRF tour here on the podcast, like the big thing with glass was we don't accept it because it just shatters throughout the process, and it costs more money to clean it up than it actually will make in return.
Yeah, I mean, it's
and as a consumer, you don't think about it. You're like, oh yeah, if that shit falls from a 20-foot machine, it's going to shatter, and then somebody's got to clean it up.
The things that people don't realize, behind the scenes with packaging and the impact and that's one of glass's big challenges is their safety and weight and things like that. But it has its merits. It's got its place.
100%.
And I think that's super important to understand where that belongs.
The other eye-opening thing for me on doing like that actual tour of the MRF was I used to shred all my stuff and then put it like in a Trader Joe's paper bag and put it in my. I'm like, dude, I'm halfway there. I'm helping them out. And when we did the tour, they're like, we don't take shredded paper. No. And they showed the ground, and it was like a confetti party just exploded everywhere from people putting shredded stuff. And they're like, it doesn't make it through the process. We got to clean it up. It costs money to staff people. You're not helping anybody.
Don't recycle your shreds, people. Shreds. Actually, some of the things that people don't realize that actually a lot of those, like acetate boxes and things like that, people will throw in. You get a lot of those clear plastic boxes for people who aren't familiar. They're beautiful on shelf, and they have their place. They've packed flat. A lot of times those will wind up going through and getting sorted off with paper. So flat sheets of plastic wind up getting sorted with paper and contaminating that stream, having to get sifted out. So you have all these kind of cross contaminations, and I think that's what we have to help brands wrestle with and try and sift through is what are these downstream impacts of these decisions that we're going to make. Whether that be through fulfillment or through the recycling process. Totally random, fascinating story, but speaking of things that you don't realize, people are like, oh, my bottle leaked when it got to my house, right? We've got this huge thing in e-commerce with liquids, and there was the story of I won't say whether it was UPS or FedEx or one of the major deliveries, where put yourself in the shoes of an associate at the fulfillment or the distribution operation, right? You walk by, you see a puddle on the floor. It's clear liquid.
Yeah.
Is it bodily fluids? Is it radioactive? Is it caustic? Is it like, do you reach down and wipe it up, or do you call a hazmat team and have to shut the entire plant down? Like they don't know. You don't know. Like, but by the time they see a puddle on the floor, the box is probably already on a truck somewhere, moved off, and we just don't understand the impact of something simple like that in packaging, like a leaky bottle or a flat piece of plastic, or like it's stuff that sounds trivial, but at the end of the day, the impact that it can have is massive.
That's the part where we, as designers and brands, like you have to take the time to educate the consumer. And not just take the time to educate them, but they don't necessarily want to take the time either. So you have to make it like really obvious and really simple.
Yeah, or entertaining. Which is again,
it's like you gotta grab.
That's kind of why again, one of the big reasons that we had started that video series was, if we can try and make it fun and engaging and talk about recyclability or talk about like challenges, the things that people always complain about, the things that people hate. Oh, I hate opening these plastic things. Well, like, why are they that way? Like, what's made them that way? I'm not going to make you hate them less, maybe, but at least give you an understanding of it. So I think educating people through entertaining is something that I find a lot of joy in.
All right. So if if we are tasked to redesign some of the most hated packaging on the planet, what's the process, right? We're redesigning bacon packaging.
Bacon packaging. What's the process like?
Yeah. How do you start?
You start by consuming just ridiculous amounts of bacon. That's where you start. Any good bacon project starts with a lot of bacon. I mean, any good project starts with a lot of bacon consumption. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
The first part needs to start with the. A lot of people would say, "Oh, it's all about the consumer." It is not all about the consumer. The consumer is an important piece of this. It's just as much about the brand, because if the brand can't make it affordably, if the brand can't produce it efficiently, if the brand can't do something, then it's never even going to make it to the shelf. People can't make money on it if it doesn't get to the shelf. So, like, it's about understanding that entire supply process, right? Like, we need to understand why do consumers hate it right now? What are the pain points of it right now? And then mesh that over the top of how is it made right now, and what kind of flexibility is there within the systems that the brand is using, right? Like, let's go do a plant tour. Let's see how the bacon's made. Let's bring home some bacon.
Yeah.
And so it really starts with understanding and mapping the entire process, and then it starts with the whole what if. That's the sexy part of the process, right? Where the designers get in, we sketch some really cool stuff, and think of all different things. We look at adjacent industries. Well, how does this industry deal with this thing? Is it the slime?
Mm-hmm.
Is it the resealability? Like, what is it that I don't like? And so, yeah, it's about exploring wide and sketching deep, and then coming back and working with the brand to say, all right, here's some ideas, what's working, what's not working, how do we do this? And involving people at all different parts of the process, right? Like, talk to the consumer, great. I think that's a given, but go talk to the plant. One of my favorite things to do, in fact, tomorrow I get to go do it again, is go with a couple people from our team, go to a plant when we're kicking off a project. And my request is, give us the smartest person in the plant for 2 hours. And everybody knows, like, every plant has that lady or that guy been around for 20 years. They know everything, and you can just grill them. You're like, well, why do you do it that way? Oh, well, there was a project like 6 years ago where we were going to move this and move that. And so that thing wound up over there, and the project never came. But it's like those things are really where you unlock gold in this process, because you find out, like, what is and what isn't flexible, what is and what isn't sacred. And you can start to learn, like, where do you have flexibility? Like, most, if not all, brands can never say, hey, we're just going to throw the entire operation out and start from scratch. Like, we can't ignore what's happening and how it's done right now. And then let's understand the rest of the supply chain. Well, how does bacon get delivered, and how does bacon get displayed and retailed? And, that's a very important piece to the ideation process, and then to ultimately vetting ideas through. And then we're going to refine some stuff. We're going to prototype some things, and then we're going to make some more bacon. And that's a super crash course through the process. But yeah.
I mean, it's important to it's important to do plant tours, right? Because you like you said, you find out what is and what isn't sacred. You definitely learn as a designer a ton just of, like, why things are the way they are. And, if you're a young designer, you get a chance to go and do a plant tour for any product that you're working on. Like, take it, put on the safety shoes and all the stuff that you got to do to go through these plants, and just ask all the questions, because it's going to make you a better designer, not just on this project, but on future projects, right? Like, it's like you're starting to build all of this experience that you can lean on for future things.
Yeah, and people always have their own perspective, right? Like, you think things should be designed around the way that you're using it or you're interacting with it. You don't understand how much other things are involved in the process. I think as a designer, it opens your eyes to, man, the first time you step into a plant that's running bottles that you literally can't see without a strobe light. And you're like, like, why can't you like change a little radius? Why can't you tweak these little things? And then you walk into this thing and go like just literally faster than you can see it. You go, oh, I get it. Like,
Yeah, that makes
now
sense now.
that checks
Yeah.
out. Like, you don't get it. And I honestly, coming from the manufacturing side of the world where I spent the first decade of my career, I was that obnoxious designer that was constantly pushing. And there were a lot of times where, the team around me was awesome. They were like, Brent, fine, go do it.
Go try
But
it.
you're going to go out on the line and process it. You're going to be there. And and the process engineers are going to be swearing at you for designing this thing. But it was great experience, great exposure. But it really helped me build an empathy for the manufacturing operations. It helped me build that confidence. Like, they want to do cool stuff, but at the same time, they don't want to hate their jobs every day because you've made this process so small and miserable that all they're doing is fighting, and they look bad because the machine's not running. And like, it's just, they want to do cool things, but they don't want to do it at the cost of their own sanity and their own jobs, their bonuses that are based off of performance. Like, so building that empathy with manufacturing side of the world as a designer is, to me, one of the most valuable things that you can do.
100%. And, I think in the early stages of design, if you're already thinking, all right, we've got to run it through this particular process, or this plant has to run it. For me, it's always having that conversation with the guy, with the guys or women that are running the equipment. And just being like, hey, what have you seen? What have you seen? How can we push this machine? Because they're running it, they're experienced from a completely different perspective, and they might come back and say, oh, you know what I would do is I would change this, I would change this radius, this heat seal process by 1, 2, 3, and it's going to make my job easier, and it'll reduce this much material. Like, they're thinking about it all day long, right? Like, they have ideas too, and you can't discount anybody in the development process.
No, and I think our job as designers is, at least the way that we talk amongst our team, it's not to be the people who think of the craziest, wildest things and design the sexy, uncomfortable chairs that nobody wants to sit in. Our job as designers is really bridging a lot of things, right? Like, we need to understand the constraints over here and the desires over here and all these different things, and find those bridges. Like, the plant's going to want this thing round and black and whatever, like, so it runs easily, but the consumer wants it like tetrahedron and crystal colored and whatever. Like, we've got to figure out how to bridge those two worlds. It's not just about only appeasing the plant side, and it's not just about appeasing the customer. It's about finding something that is the least compromise but the most effective across all those. That's really our job as designers, and that's what makes it so challenging. Is if I'm designing literally just something that needs to look pretty, anybody can do that. Not anybody, but like, that's easy. If I've got to design something that looks pretty and runs effectively and efficiently, and plants love it, like that, that's hard.
Yeah, that's a specialty, right? That's not what anybody can do. So as we start wrapping up, man, looking kind of to the future here, are you guys looking at AI for anything? Are you guys using it? Are you guys playing with it? Or is that not even on the table at the moment?
Man, AI has its place. Just kind of like any other material and process. It's a tool.
Yeah.
And I think there's some really cool stuff on the AI side of the world that generative design, things like that, that has some incredible engineering applications, and there's really some sexy things that can be designed by it. But I think it's a tool. I think it has its applications, and I think AI design with supervision is our role as a designer. Is to, if we're going to incorporate AI, it's to understand where AI makes sense, and when AI is doing something that is beneficial and when it's not. So being that screen, that filter that says, all right, that was a good idea. Now let's build on that. Let's make sure that's commercializable. Let's do these things with it. So I think it absolutely has its place, and I think it's going to continue to have a role in certain categories, in certain aspects. But will it get smart enough to rule out the human factor? I don't think so. I think it's going to be just like robots. You're going to work alongside humans, and they're going to make things more efficient and do the stuff that we don't want to do, and come up with ideas and things that we may not have thought of. So, I see it as a potentially very powerful tool.
Yeah, it's super crazy. I know the guys over at Packdora, which is like a template website, packdora.com. Those guys, like, you type in some sizes and stuff. Like, they're working on for next year to release like an adaptive component to it, right? So if you've got one box design, all of a sudden now you've got 10 sizes of the same thing. You just plug it in, it'll create all the die lines for those other sizes and move all the artwork around. And it's not going to be perfect, but it streamlines the shitty part of the job, right? Where you're like, now I've got to move, I've got to adjust these sizes. I've got to move these things around. And it like that is like one use case that I'm like, dude, that's amazing. Like, that just saved me
totally
5 days
now.
of headache.
You've got to be like, something that has to happen is you have to be very, very good at evaluating those, right? Like being critical and saying, did that move? Did it skew? Did it do something else? Like, if all the rules aren't perfect in the way that AI is applying its logic, like, it can make things more painful than it was worth, because you've got to now go to each of those and like tweak little things and move all sorts of tiny stuff around. But that's absolutely a great case for where AI belongs.
Yeah, and I was talking to an agency in Long Beach that they created their own, and this was a couple of years ago. They actually created their own system that they had taught through just inputting their own designs into it and creating like their own style. So a brand comes to them and they can kind of plug in the information, and it would already generate like general ideas with, scale of image, logo position, just based on best practices and what was working in the market. So I don't know, it's just crazy to see it to the level it is now, where you can just create something out of nothing. But in terms of like a tool, there's a lot of applications for us.
It's going to be a lot easier to adopt it on the graphics side of the world, right? Like that's just a little bit easier. The structural side of the world, it can create and generate ideas and designs, but ultimately mapping in some of the specific constraints and understanding and nuance, it's not going to have that for quite some time. And so I think there's places where it's going to happen a lot faster than others, for sure.
Yeah, for sure, man. So let's kind of wrap it up here. I know you got a busy day today, dude. Brent, I appreciate it. What's the most controversial thought you've got on packaging?
The most controversial thought I have on packaging?
What's the quote I can clip here where people are like, oh my God, this guy's crazy?
I mean, at some point, my job is to get rid of my job. My job is to simplify packaging and reduce and eliminate packaging where necessary. But I don't think my job will ever go away. The best thing that I can do sometimes is eliminate my job.
Dude, that's, it's funny because that's something, an approach that I've taken, where it's like, my job is going to be eliminated at some point. Let me be the one to do it. Let me be the one to find out how it's going to happen. I released a book on die lines, I don't know, like 7 years ago or something like that, which had, 5 million downloads. And people in like the manufacturing side, people in the design, they're like, why did you do this? Why did you do it for free? And it was like, dude, people are looking for these die lines. I don't want people to call me hey, can you create this for me? I'm like, dude, it's right here. Just take it. Don't call me. And I actually got more calls, right? It was like, hey, how'd you come up with this? How do you change this? How do you alter it? So it's like you're trying to eliminate your job, but it's not going to get eliminated. If you're the one pushing for that, people are going to come to you. So if anybody wants to reach out to you, man, what's the best place for them to contact you?
They can go to fuseneo.com, Fuseneo, or they can hit me up on LinkedIn.